And everyone, welcome in it. It is game week here in Oxford, and then, of course, the LSU Tigers are next on deck for Ole Miss. And happy to welcome in Matthew Brune, who covers LSU for the Bengal Tiger on three. That's affiliate of On3 Sports, and of course, rivals. And Matthew, we talked just a moment ago. This is a big one for both teams.
Yeah, definitely. I think both teams obviously come in here with undefeated and with high expectations on the year. But to this point, neither one has played I know Clemson was ranked when LSU played them, but that was obviously that one is aging like milk a little bit. But these are two teams that I think are going to be tested really for the first time in terms of top end SEC competition.
Let's first of all take a look at the offense, and I want to actually start at wide receiver. There's a player that Mississippians are very familiar with, and that's Xavier Thomas. Played at Mississippi State and was an incredible talent down in Starkville. How is he doing at LSU? And what do you foresee type of season he's had so far, and what are you kind of looking at down the road for him?
Yeah, he's been really good. Honestly, he's surpassed my expectations for this season. Last year, he had a significant role in the team. He was the main return man, and then in the offense, they utilized him in the short to intermediate game quite a bit. This year, I've been impressed with his ability to expand his game a little bit and to continue to round out what he's able to do at the receiver position. Garrett Nussmeier obviously trusts him and looks for him quite a bit. You have him and you have Aaron Anderson who both are kind of, 5'9", 5'10", kind of receivers that work well in the slot. So Xavier to this point, 11 catches, 115 yards, 2 touchdowns in 4 games. It's a really solid stat line, and he's someone that will factor into this game for sure.
Taking a look at this, since you brought up the quarterback, let's talk about Garrett Nussmeier just a moment. On a couple of Heisman Trophy Um, preseason list. He's still, had a really good season so far. What are you kind of expecting out of him in Oxford? And do you expect him to tuck it and run very much?
Not as much. He is a much more pocket passer than I'd say probably 95% of quarterbacks in college football nowadays. But he is extremely accurate when healthy. He's extremely comfortable making some tough throws. The anticipation throws that he can make are the reason why he was high on draft boards and Heisman lists going into the year. It's been, I would say, a slower start for him in the offense through 4 games because there's just been some continuity that they haven't had. I think on the offensive line, the question marks of replacing basically all 5 starters has been something they've monitored, and then the run game just hasn't really gotten going for them. So a lot's been put on Garrett's shoulders. He was battling an injury entering this season that he's overcame. So I think with him over that now and past that hump, he looked a lot better against Southeastern on Saturday and should be able to rip it, this weekend without any, hindrance or anything like that.
Yeah, 6 touchdowns, 2 interceptions this year, 94, 137. Um, on the ground, you look at what LSU's been able to do in years past, they always have a running back that kind of stands out. I know Durham is one that's had a pretty good year so far. Where is LSU in the running back room this year?
Yeah, Caden Durham is definitely still the go-to guy. He hasn't had the year that I think a lot of people were wondering. Honestly, a lot of it is because the offensive line is a work in progress and has been working through some of the kinks. But he's still a very talented player, someone who can make something out of nothing. He came in as one of the top 3 or 4 running backs in the conference. I'd still say he's in that top 5 range, even if the production hasn't been where most were expecting. So it's definitely the run game is something that in every game this year has been some kind of complementary to what LSU has been able to do with Garrett Nussmeier. So the hope is you can throw the ball to set up the run. They haven't been able to do that at a high level yet. So it's hard to maintain consistency when you can't run the ball. So Durham's still very, very talented, and he's capable of making a guy or two miss and getting some extra yards where you don't expect him to.
Yeah, Caleb Jackson, Harlem Berry, and Jawan Johnson kind of round out who's carried the ball. Out of those three, who has surprised you the most?
Juwan Johnson, definitely. He is a guy who, out of high school 2 years ago, was a kind of dual threat quarterback to a degree. But you could tell he wasn't going to play quarterback at the college level, but he is an incredible athlete, someone who set a lot of Louisiana high school records in terms of what he could do on the football field at, at that level. And so with, Durham being the main guy, they've needed a secondary back, and Harlem Berry is the number one running back in the country in 2025 class. So a lot of people assumed it'd be him, including myself. But Juwan Johnson has been fantastic. He's kind of carved out a niche role as a guy who understands pass protection. He can catch the ball. He can make a couple guys miss. He's really elusive. So he's probably the one that surprised me so far in the backfield.
Want to go back to the wide receiver room just for a minute. Ole Miss
Mhm.
fans very familiar with Barry and Brown, second on the team in receptions behind Anderson. How has he been this year?
Yeah, he's been really good. He's someone that Garrett Nussmeier trusts. What I liked about him, he transferred in from Kentucky. What I liked was that he is a real three-level player, someone who can catch the ball at the line of scrimmage or behind it, make someone miss. He can do the intermediates. He can do the deep ball. I think there's just like he has a lot of talent. And for those who don't know, he is also the leading return man in the country in terms of kickoff returns for touchdowns. I believe he has five in his career, which is the most in the country right now. So it speaks to his elusiveness, his speed, his top end talent. I think it's really something that LSU leans on. Him and Aaron Anderson are kind of the go-to guys at receiver right now.
Quarterback. I know it's Nussmeier. Kind of going back to the quarterback again. One player that Mississippi football fans remember is Michael Van Buren, who quarterbacked at Mississippi State. Have you seen him very much this year? And if so,
Yeah,
what are your thoughts on him?
yeah, we saw him last week against Southeastern for the first time, and he looked good. He looked really sharp. Obviously, on that Mississippi State team, he had to kind of do a lot, and some of it was really good, some of it was bad. He learned. He was a freshman. I think he goes to LSU with the hope of growing, learning, not having pressure on him for a year, and kind of just settling in. And then obviously with Garrett Nussmeier being a fifth year senior, the hope is in 2026 he can step in and potentially be that starter for LSU. But yeah, he looked good against Southeastern. I think there's a lot of positivity around him, and he's going to continue to kind of refine his game. This is a redshirt year for him, and he's going to he's in an interesting situation where you play in the SEC as a freshman, and then you transfer to go redshirt a year at LSU. So I think he's made the most of it.
You made mention the offensive line. I guess it's maybe a little early before you draw any drastic conclusions. A lot of transfers, just like everybody in the SEC. How has the offensive line been, and have they kept Garrett Nussmeier upright for the most part?
For the most part, it's definitely been, like I said before, a work in progress. With five new starters here, it's just they had two transfers out of the portal, their center and their right guard. The rest of them were all guys that have been developing for the past couple years. Nussmeier's he does a good job, I think, of sensing pressure, even though he's not really quick. I think he does an all right job at sensing the pressure and trying to roll. The right tackle spot's been a concern for LSU so far, but I think the bigger concern is the run game and the run blocking. That has been pretty abysmal so far. So if LSU can find any way to run the ball, if LSU's offensive line can get any kind of push, it's a plus. So the pass protection's been better than the run blocking, but it's still, like I said, all a work in progress.
LSU's always been kind of synonymous for defense, and Deshaun Womack is someone that Ole Miss picked up along with one more defensive back, and I'm looking
Sage Ryan, yeah.
Sage Ryan. Yeah,
Mhm.
uh, neither have really taken that big step forward for Ole Miss. At least that's not from my standpoint. I've not seen them really solidify their positions. What was the overall thought process from the fans and the coaches and the media when those two players entered the portal and then would eventually end up at Ole Miss?
Yeah, two, I'd say, pretty differing opinions between the two. We'll start with the positive. Deshaun Womack, I think, was always a talented player at defensive end out of Maryland, Baltimore area. Very, very twitchy, quick. as a freshman made a couple plays that had LSU fans really excited, but then last year just didn't wasn't able to get on the field and as much as I think he wanted to, and it resulted in him entering the portal. But still, I think a very talented player, someone that, Ole Miss, I think will hope to get going a bit this year. Off the edge, that would help their pass rush quite a bit. Sage Ryan had a really, really troubling, limited career, I'd say at LSU is probably the way to put it. A guy who was a five-star out of Louisiana, a really, really high-rated guy that LSU and Alabama were fighting for till the very end. LSU gets him, and it ends up being a very, very lackluster career at LSU. And so they tried moving him from safety to corner to nickel to safety, and it never really stuck. He's not quite big enough or fast enough to really impact the game, at least in his time at LSU. So I think that was one that LSU fans were fine with. The Deshaun Womack is clearly the bigger loss, I think, in LSU fans' mind.
Looking at the defense, I think that kind of starts with linebacker Whit Weeks, who, as you remember, Matthew played an incredible game against Ole Miss
Mhm.
last year in Baton Rouge. Made just seemed like he was on every single
I think he had
tackle.
like 20 tackles or something like that. Yeah.
And yeah, it appears that West Weeks, I'm assuming is
Yeah.
his older brother, and then I think I saw maybe Zach Weeks is another brother. So there are a lot
Yeah.
of Weeks on the roster. I want to start with Whit though. What makes him so good?
He is an incredible athlete. The speed, the tracking ability, the eyes, and then he's a ferocious tackler. A real headhunter in terms of a guy who really wants to go in there and get the ball, hunt the ball. He's fantastic to watch the way he can shoot gaps and get into the backfield and make plays. So, I think even as a freshman 2 years ago, we saw flashes of it, but he was like, I'm just running around and trying to figure things out on the fly. Last year we saw him settle in a little bit more. Still, he had some ups and downs. I'd say clearly some highs where he'd get 15 plus tackles. And then sometimes he'd be out of position. This year, I think he's put it all together. Preseason, All-American preseason, All SEC guy, and he's lived up to the billing for sure.
Who would is Jack Pyburn,
Hmm.
Patrick Payton? Maybe is that who kind of would fill the void left by Womack?
Yeah, pretty much. That's those are the defensive ends that they look for. I'd say Patrick Payton is probably the one-to-one replacement in terms of a guy who can pass rush and be quick and get some pressures off the edge. Pyburn is more of a run block, a run stopper from Florida. Patrick Payton transferred in from Florida State, had a really good 2023 along with that undefeated team. Last year was kind of hit or miss, and Patrick Payton this year I think has been really, really good, even if the stats aren't overwhelming.
Looking on the defensive front, I know there's Patrick Payton, Bernard Gooden, both senior transfers, along with Ahmad Bro, Gabriel Relaford, who had a pretty good year last year as a freshman. Who's really standing out for you on the defensive front?
Yeah, so I would say Relaford, but he is set to miss this game against Ole Miss. He has shoulder injury, and they're going to see if it's how long exactly he'll be out. But he is out for this game. Like you said, a sophomore that has a lot of talent there, so a lot more pressure on Patrick Payton. But to answer your question, I would go down and say Bernard Gooden at defensive tackle has been tremendous. We saw him in fall camp, and he's really, really twitchy, a transfer from USF, a guy who's not super big, only about 6'1", maybe like 275, 280, but just finds ways to get in the backfield. He was tremendous against Clemson, always harassing Cade Klubnik, and I think he's someone that will continue to have a big role on this defense.
Outside of the Weeks brothers, Tylen Singleton, Davon Keys, have they seen a little bit of action?
Yeah, Keys and Singleton are were kind of the twos behind West and Whit Weeks. Singleton's kind of a young athlete, made the transition from safety down, and then Devon Keys is a sophomore who comes from Alito in Texas, which is one of the bigger and best high school football programs, and really, really polished players. So they round out the room nicely. It gives them a good linebacker core between those four.
Okay, we haven't talked about him, so let's do it. Harold Perkins Jr. He's being talked about specifically in Oxford circles. Is Suntaran Perkins is kind of mirroring what we saw of the Harold Perkins when he was allowed to roam free. Then Brian Kelly kind of reeled him in and put him at some different spots and kind of limited him maybe last year or the year before. What are you seeing from Harold Perkins Jr. this year?
Yeah, this has been the year I think people have been waiting for to a degree. Obviously, freshman year, he was incredibly exciting. He had all those sacks and the pass rushes and spies and whatnot, and they just threw him out there to the wolves, and he was awesome. Then his second year in 2023, he played kind of a Sam linebacker, kind of an outside linebacker role, and he was still very, very effective. And and I think he ended it with still 14 tackles for loss and whatnot. Then last year, he moved to inside linebacker, and like you said, kind of was reeled in a bit, didn't have any tackles for loss, but then tore his ACL 4 games in. This year is kind of a culmination of everything that he's done and been through. I think he's learned and he understands what he can and can't do on the field, and now he's playing like a hybrid safety linebacker spot for them as kind of a fifth decent defensive back on the field. He's been awesome attacking the quarterback. He's been awesome in space. He is really, really aggressive right now, and I think he's someone that we have also seen take away the legs of Cade Klubnik and DJ Lagway. So that's the hope, and that's kind of the X factor is can Harold Perkins continue to bother these mobile quarterbacks and kind of neutralize them a little bit?
Um, we'll get to the entire secondary in just a moment, but a player that Ole Miss was really in on is a Mississippi product, PJ Woodland. How has he been to you? How's he kind of stood out?
Yeah, he's been one of the most surprising players, I'd say, on this entire defense this year. And that's not to say he's not talented. I was very high on him as a prospect. He was arguably the best player in Mississippi just in terms of like a high school player, just the impact that he had at the high school level. He did it on both sides of the ball, return man. He was doing everything out there. So a fantastic high school player. LSU gets him as a high 3-star guy. And last year he played a bit. We figured he would. But this year when they brought in DJ Pickett, a 5-star, they brought in two other cornerback transfers. It was unclear if he was going to stay, if he was going to be able to carve out a role. And he's not only done that, but he's been the starter for 4 games. He's been tremendous. I really am impressed with the way he's been able to hold on to that job. And even with DJ Pickett, a 6'4", 5-star right behind him, he's done a terrific job throughout the year being able to play man and do his job well.
Overall, how's the secondary done this year? I know with the transfer of there were some, pros and cons about the transfer of
Mhm.
Sage Ryan, but where is the secondary at overall to you?
Yeah, they spent, whatever they had to spend. They hit the portal and they went and got some dudes in the portal that helped them quite a bit. AJ Halsey and Tamarcus Cooley as safety, both of them very, very high level players that do their job. AJ Halsey was all Big 12 first team last year at Houston. It comes over. Tamarcus Cooley was a super effective player at NC State. So they lock down the safety spots. Then you have Mansour Lane transfers in from Virginia Tech, who's been one of the best corners in the country
Mhm.
to this point. And then, like I said, PJ Woodland and DJ Pickett kind of round out the room in terms of the cornerbacks there. So you feel really good. You have another high 4-star guy in Deshaun Spears, who's a sophomore this year as well. So they just are really, really talented, and I think have been biggest difference from last year this year.
Lane Kiffin, you heard it, Matthew, talked about how I don't think it was a shot, but he said, LSU did what they needed to do from a financial standpoint and secured some of the best talent in the secondary. I think on paper it's one of the best secondaries in not only the conference but the country. Are they playing like it?
Yeah, they definitely are. I mean, again, Clemson has fallen off a cliff quite a bit since they played, but in that game, they completely blanketed those receivers, which is a talented receiver room. Florida had some speed and some guys who could beat you if you weren't sharp, and LSU's defense was terrific. Obviously, 5 interceptions against DJ Lagway. This secondary has been everything that I hoped it could be, and now we get to see them against Ole Miss, who clearly is one of the best offenses and passing attacks as they are every year under Lane Kiffin.
Um, I don't know if slow is the right word, but it feels like the offense is off to a bit of a slow start. With everything coming into the season, we knew how good Garrett Nussmeier is, Barry and Brown at receiver, Xavier Thomas, Caden Durham, offensive line. Obviously lost some, but had some great transfers coming in. What do you think has kind of led to the somewhat slow start on offense?
Yeah, I kind of mentioned earlier, but the offensive line struggling to run block has kind of made them inconsistent and kind of one-dimensional at times. Garrett Nussmeier also early in the season was battling a little bit of a torso injury, so as a quarterback, he wasn't able to fully, I think, let it rip the way he wants to.
But
And then
you believe he's good to go 100%, right?
yeah, so last week was apparently again according to um, coaches and according to Brian Kelly and even Garrett Nussmeier, last week was the first time he felt at 100% this year, and he looked like it. He looked like a very, very different player in terms of what he had been through 3 weeks. So he's good to go. I think that gives them the ability to take some more deep shots because before that, through 3 weeks, he was really limited to just throwing within about 15 yards, 20 yards. And so now the hope is, all right, we can take a top off of defense. We can balance things out. We don't have to just rely on screens and short stuff as much. So yeah, it's a little bit of everything. Offensive line, Nussmeier, them trying to just find an identity, and it's that this is a big game, obviously, because we know Ole Miss is going to put up points, so LSU's going to have to match it to a degree.
Eh, look at the schedule, and I think every team in the SEC is kind of mapping out, okay, what is our path to the college football playoff? If we get to 9-3, what are the three losses? If we get to 10-2, 11-1, where are our losses? How does the schedule kind of pan out when you look at it sitting right now at 4-0? Obviously, LSU coming up on Saturday. Feels like two games, Carolina and LSU and Vanderbilt, or should I say Carolina and then Vanderbilt coming up in the following 2 weeks. Then you get all of a sudden you get A&M, Alabama, Arkansas, Western Kentucky, and Oklahoma. How does the schedule kind of line up for you, and kind of how do you navigate it if you're LSU trying to get to either I think 10-1 undefeated, or maybe I'm sorry 11-1, 10-2, or maybe undefeated.
Yeah, so like you said, 10-2 is kind of the range where you want to get to make the playoffs. This is a huge game, this Ole Miss one. But regardless of the outcome, you have, like you said, a slew of SEC games coming up that you're going to have to win. I mean, South Carolina at home, we've seen them struggle so far this year. You got to win that one. At Vanderbilt, which Vanderbilt obviously has been a very good team this year. That's going to be tricky. All the road games in the SEC are hard. So at Vanderbilt, home against A&M. That's a series where the home team has won. I think the past 10 meetings, past 9 meetings. So you favor LSU, but clearly A&M is talented. At Alabama, that's one going into the season that most people penciled as a loss. Maybe it is still a loss, but Alabama has, not looked as good as I think most were expecting. And then you end it with Arkansas, Western Kentucky, both should be wins at home, and then at Oklahoma. Oklahoma's been good. So you look at the toughest games on the schedule at Ole Miss. I'd say home against A&M, at Alabama, and at Oklahoma. Between those 4 games, can you go 2-2?
Right.
Um, that's going to be the challenge, and I think a lot of it hinges on, if they can win this week against Ole Miss, you build yourself a cushion, you build yourself some room for error that, frankly, they didn't have last year. Last year they lost to USC week 1, and it immediately put them behind the 8 ball. So when you lose to Florida and A&M and then Alabama, you're out. So this is a big game, and I think that's kind of the path moving forward is can you win 2 of those 4 really tough games? And honestly, it might be 3 out of 5 if you include at Vanderbilt.
Final question for you today. Matthew Brune does a great job covering LSU for On3 Sports. This game, I mean, the line's kind of been all over the place. It's been plus LSU, I think 1.5, then it's plus Ole Miss 1.5, and I think eventually it'll probably end up being a pick 'em. What do you think coming into the game on Saturday?
Yeah, it's really tough for me to handicap and pick at this point, because I do think these two teams will be challenged in a way they have not been challenged before. LSU's defense will be challenged by the best offense that they faced, I think, by a considerable margin. And also, Ole Miss's offense will be challenged by the best defense that it's faced, I think, by a considerable margin. So, a lot we don't know. I do think LSU's defense is legitimate. I think the athletes are legit. So, I could see this being a little lower scoring than what most people would think, just in terms of the quarterback play in this game and the offensive minds in this game. I don't, as a score. I'd put it somewhere around that 24 range, 24-21 range. If I had to say one right now, I have to put in my picks at some point Thursday or Friday. But so just on first glance, I'd say 24-21. I lean LSU just because I think the defense is legitimate. I think Garrett Nussmeier, now that he's healthy, can make a couple plays to get it done.
It's Matthew Brune does a great job covering LSU for the Bengal Tiger. That's of course an On3 affiliate. Be sure and follow him on Twitter/X at Matthew Brune. That's BRUNE_. Matthew, thanks for joining us. We appreciate it, and we'll talk to you soon.
Yes, thanks for having me, Brad. Anytime.